So I talked about the birdathon, and I talked about the awards dinner, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about our special guest tonight is Van Pierszalowski, who is the uh, executive director of the California Bird Atlas Project, and I'm going to let him talk all about that this evening. But if you're familiar with the Breeding Bird Atlas, you've seen ours, this massive book, which was published in 2012, I believe, no, 2007. And in fact, I was involved in it, and then I designed the book and got it printed. We raised money for every single bird in the Breeding Bird Atlas, and at that time, there were 177 species breeding in our county. And now we've gone beyond that with recent reports of least bittern and black skimmer. And I think there are some other birds that have been added to the list, taken off of the potential bird breeders and added to the official breeders. So this is a wonderful atlas, and it's available for members for free on our website as a download. But way beyond this project is the project that Van is going to be talking about. And as I met him a few months ago online, where we talked about becoming an official founding sponsor of the Atlas, and we now have been inducted into the glorious collection of sponsoring organizations, various Audubon and Alliance chapters. And our official bird that we have been sponsoring, or will be sponsoring, is the American avocet. So I'm sure that's pretty familiar to everybody here. So I'm excited about that. But when I met Van a few months ago, I didn't realize how much we had in common. Um, Van, I was born in California. He spent time in Alaska on his father's salmon fishing boat. I've been to Alaska, and my father was a minister, so fisher of men, to a biblical reference. He majored in anthropology at UC Berkeley, go Bears. I majored in English literature at UC Berkeley, an equally challenging career-wise major, I would say, but it had nothing to do with my current career, but I got through it. You appeared on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. I actually went to high school with Conan O'Brien. He was in my algebra class. He's just a great guy. So if you call him, he probably will not remember me. But it was fun that we have that in common too. And then in your California Big Year, you came out of the year with 503 species. I think the first birder to surpass 500 in a year in the state for a year. Well, my entire all years California list is 507. So we're really neck and neck when it comes to California birds. So anyway, congratulations on all those fabulous accomplishments. I didn't know we were practically brothers. We're kind of the same person almost. And I loved talking with you a few months ago when we first met and talked about the Atlas and how we could become sponsors. We've had Barry, who Barry Langton-Lazane, former board member, has done incredible work with his app, Birdathon, to incorporate the Atlas blocks so that people know where they're birding in the Atlas. Anyway, enough about that. He's been evangelizing the Atlas as well, as you know, and now in San Luis Obispo. But I'm so glad you're here, Van, and I look forward to any updates you have, and to just refresh my memory and everybody else's memory about the magnitude of this project and the challenges you anticipate seeing, and where you are in the project. So you can go ahead and take the screen away whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. We're brothers, Matthew and Van, just different last names.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for the Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance for coming on board as a founding partner of the Atlas. And what a great bird, the American avocet. When I first fell in love with birds, living in California my whole life, you could live your whole life and never really see one of these, even though they're not particularly rare. And then you look at one for just 5 seconds, you're like, my dear Lord, how is that real? That thing is insane. Look at the bill, the colors, the legs. It's like, how was I living in the same state as this thing for my whole childhood? And I didn't even know they existed. It's absolutely incredible. So just to give you a quick overview of what I'll be talking about, going to do a quick intro, just a little bit about my background, how the project came into be, a little bit about the organization California Bird Atlas. It is its own 501c3 nonprofit, a little bit about how it's integrated with eBird, the timeline and methodology, a little status report. We like to call it Atlas status because that kind of rhymes. A little preview, some tools that help atlasing, ways to get involved, and then we'll save questions for the end. Definitely have left some time at the end for questions, and feel free to either say them verbally at the end, or if you think of them during and you don't want to forget, type them in the chat, and Matthew will keep track and we can go through them as we go. So yeah, first a little intro about me. Like Matthew said, I was born and raised in Cambria, California, a small little town on the Central Coast. But I spent every summer of my life in on Kodiak Island in Alaska. My dad hitchhiked up from Northridge in 1969, hair down to his butt, and got a job on a fishing boat, and then did that for 50 years as his career. And so I started working on his boat when I was old enough, or maybe not quite old enough. And then I went to, Cal, studied UC Berkeley, where all the money is, as you know. Just kidding. And started working on my father's boat, to get me through Berkeley. And then I started this music career. Here's on the right, I love showing this photo because the Beatles are my favorite band, and that's Ringo Starr, who happened to be the celebrity guest on Conan when we were the musical guest on Conan at late night. And so it was so cool to meet him, and I still send shivers down my spine just thinking about it. It's so nice. Did that for 13 years. Was on the road 8 to 10 months a year for 13 years, touring throughout the U.S. and Europe. And then comes a time where your back starts hurting, and it's time for a change. And so in 2018, during Trump's first term, I kind of just realized I'd had enough. In late 2018, was on the road that whole year, and decided to quit and get into public policy. So I started working on congressional campaigns, ended up working in tech, and then finally had enough of that. It's somewhere in early 2018, 2019, fell obsessively in love with birds. I'd always loved birds. Who doesn't? But really fell deep into it. And then in 2023, that's when I did the California Big Year. And just because people love pictures of birds like I do, a few pictures from that year. I spent the whole year going up and down the state. This king eider, this yellow-billed loon. These are all pictures that I took. This was in San Mateo County, the snow bunting. Perluxia, one of the best bird names of all time, in my opinion. Thick-billed kingbird, wood sandpiper, crested caracara, red-headed woodpecker up in San Francisco. I'm sure some of you went up and saw that. Swallow-tailed gull, all these incredible birds. Red-billed tropic bird, the northern gannet, Morris, out on the Farallon Islands out there. Just, incredible diversity of these rare birds that are, typically not seen in the state. But as the year went on, as I had a lot of time alone in the car, it was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I mean, it's fun, it's a good challenge, but at the end of the day, I'm chasing rare birds, right? And so what do we mean by rare birds? My friends are, mostly musicians. Now I have a lot of birder friends, but they would ask, what do you mean when you say rare birds? If you aren't a birder, it's kind of what does it mean? And we're talking about vagrancy usually, right? We're talking about birds that it's occurring outside of its normal range, often due to navigation errors, weather, some sort of dispersal. And for birders, that's extremely fun, extremely interesting. But in terms of the conservation value that that data provides, it's pretty limited. Um, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is not going to change their land management decisions because a black Burnian warbler might show up in a teepoo tree at the mall every other year, right? It's not driving a lot of the conservation decisions. And so I was thought a lot about all this time I'm out here and it's so great and I'm meeting all these people, but at the same time I want to be, contributing more to conservation for these birds that if like I felt like at that point it saved my life. I wanted to do something for them. And then in 2024, I was asked by Kimball Garrett, the author of the first LA County or the only LA County breeding bird atlas, and Lance Binner to if I would be interested in taking over the second LA County breeding bird atlas. And so I said, yes, of course. And then I was like, what's a breeding bird atlas? And I Googled it and I started learning and, learned now that we all know it's a multi-year effort to document the breeding distribution and timing of every bird within a defined region, providing a time-bound snapshot of where and how birds reproduce. So this immediately got my attention because like this feels like it would have more conservation value than being the 97th person to report the red-headed woodpecker. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's also very fun. But then I started thinking, I was like, okay, you're asking me to do the second LA County bird atlas, but how many states? I know some states have done it. How many states? 44 states have done a statewide atlas. It's hard to find a map these days that looks like this, with California the same color as Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. And I thought that's a bit odd. And then I knew that, the main reason was that California had done county atlases. So I was like, okay, how many have really published county atlases? 15 of the 58 counties. So that's just about 17% of the state's land area. Obviously, Santa Clara is on there with your incredible book that I have a copy of about Wore It Out. But as you'll see with this map, there's an extreme bias in where these have been published in the counties where there are people. They take a lot of resources to do. And a lot of the regions of the state, it would be really, really hard to do a breeding bird atlas of Lassen County or Modoc County. There's just not a lot of birders there. And so I kept thinking about this map and this map. But the more I talked to people, I was like, oh, well, maybe we don't need, maybe this is an old-fashioned concept, these atlases. Maybe this is like not, maybe they used to be helpful, but now we have all the data we need. Not so much. So this map shows all eBird data for all years. Going back, people have put in data from long ago, looked at March through August, and if you see red on the map, which is quite a bit of it, that means nowhere within that block, which are about 3 miles by 3 miles, has there ever been a single minute of effort anywhere within that block during March through August. So there's a lot of parts of the state. That's just effort. What about documenting breeding? The map on the left is the one you just saw. The map on the right, if a block is red, that means it has 0 checklists with a single probable or confirmed breeding code all years in eBird. So clearly, there's a huge need for this data. But why, before people thought it was impossible to do this at the scale of California. It's too big of a state, can never be done. So why am I now here talking to you about this and what led me to believe it's now possible? Well, reason number one is just this rapid growth in birding, which really, has been gradually happening ever since 2000, but really went into full tilt during COVID, and hasn't slowed since then. And the birding community is not only growing at these exponential rates, it's getting younger, it's getting more diverse, and it's just expanding beyond anything anyone could imagine. The second growth is eBird, as I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Before eBird, this is an example. This is from the never published Riverside County Breeding Bird Atlas. This is a field card. And this is what the volunteers, the atlasers, would get at the beginning of the field season. This is just the front. The back is this. And they held onto this card throughout the field season, and they kept track of which, blocks they saw each bird in. And then they would send them in these envelopes, double stamps, 2 stamps, they were so thick, to a P.O. box, and hope that someone would put them on a floppy disk. And, there was just this massive lag in people's, seeing the birds, submitting them, getting them to a P.O. box. And now with eBird, we're able to see the results in real time. So because of those 2 things, that's why I decided it was now not only due, but very possible. So I founded a new organization, which is California Bird Atlas. And we couldn't do that without the incredible grassroots support of so many organizations, including Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance. There's actually more, there's like 5 more since I made this slide. These are all, I think we're up to about 34 of the 48 Audubon chapters and Bird Alliance groups in the state, plus a lot of non-Audubon affiliated organizations like East Bay Regional Park District now, CDFW. There's a lot of really incredible support, and once again, just want to thank the incredible work being done at SCVBA, and it's really gold standard as far as what bird alliances can do. So thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do it without you. Also, the support of our regional coordinators. So Pete Denton, I think, might be on this call, and Brooke Miller are 2 of our regional coordinators in Santa Clara County. We've added some people since I made this slide as well. I think maybe we're at 65 or so now. These are volunteers who are really helping to get the word out to the community, and will eventually be involved with, helping with land access both ways. And it's just been so awesome to see the people that have raised their hands to support the project. The project itself is being run on this custom-built project. It's basically, think of eBird, and then this is like a California Bird Atlas specific version of eBird. This launched officially on January 1st, 2026. So I'm happy to say our little state on the map will not be the same as Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming for that much longer. We have officially started the first year, and anyone can join the project. We encourage anyone to join any skill level, any experience level. Excited to announce that we just got word that eBird will be sending a pop-up in the eBird app for everyone who's currently in California. It'll run for, I think, 5 days to get the word out there as well. And also you can submit on the website as well. Also, if you're not an eBirder, there's other ways to submit data through iNaturalist and through our submission form. So it's not only eBird. eBird is our primary data collection and management platform, but it's not the only one. We'll be pulling data from all kinds of different sources. The timeline, where's the timeline slide? I botched it. Well, anyway, we are in the first year of the 5-year Atlas period. So that'll run year-round from January 1st, 2026 till December 31st, 2030. And then 4 years we'll spend doing data analysis and writing. Eventually, there will be a printed book and an ebook, as well as all kinds of digital resources. and scientific papers and all kinds of stuff. The basic idea that we're basing our atlas on, that is done by pretty much all the state atlases, is we divide the atlas region into these blocks, which are based on these USGS topo maps that have been around since like the late 1800s, and they all have names. There is one of the maps is called Albany, for example. And so then we take the map and we subdivide it 2 across and 3 down, and we name each of the blocks accordingly. So the northwest block of Albany is called Albany Northwest, the northeast block, Albany Northeast, etc. And when you have joined the project on eBird and then you refresh your app and join the project, you can actually see these in the eBird app. And then also, as Matthew was mentioning, Barry Langdon Lizane's incredible Birdathon app, also you're able to see where you are in relation to these block boundaries, which is really cool. So here's California. That is a lot of blocks. That is 16,527 blocks, including the offshore islands. Some of those are just partial blocks, neighboring, different states or Mexico, but that's a lot of blocks, just to give you a sense of scale. So there's the Atlas period, as I was talking about before. And then this is, the most important component of a breeding bird atlas are these, recording these breeding codes. Mainly because breeding behavior and breeding birds in particular are just especially important through a few different lenses. One, through a regulatory legal sense. Breeding birds have a lot of power. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act protects all native birds as long as they have an active nest. Also, breeding birds are extremely good bioindicators for the overall health of an ecosystem. So, as soon as the breeding birds disappear, that's a pretty good sign that something's going wrong. And so on eBird, these are, divvied up into 3 different categories. And so you can see on the bottom, the possible codes: H for inappropriate habitat, S, singing bird now, and then all the way up to, you can't get more confirmed than a nest with young. So the confirmed codes definitely have the most power. And when we end up at the end of the 5 years, we'll be looking at those a lot. But the probables and possibles will also, inform some final products as well. And then the idea generally with the breeding bird atlas is you do it again. So this is the breeding bird atlas of the Catalan region in Spain. And you can see they have these cool maps that show, the first time they did it in 1975 and then 1999. And again, showing how it's changed. We are going to be creating historic species maps based on county atlas data, eBird data, all kinds of other stuff, so that we won't have to wait 30 years to do another one. We'll have something to compare it to, even though it's not quite as good as if there had been a state atlas, let's say 30 years ago. The other reason why it's important to document these breeding codes is that, just because something is present in the breeding season in the area or the county or the region that it normally breeds in, that doesn't mean that it's breeding there. It could be in post-breeding dispersal, temporal variability, all these things that you know about. And we like to show this study done by USGS. This was a study of golden eagles, and the map on the left, you see it's like, oh, they're pretty much everywhere in this region. But then the B, it's like, what is that gaping yellow hole in the middle? And that is where they are not actually breeding. So the map on the left, you would assume it's in the breeding season, that's where they are. But the map on the right shows that with breeding data, you actually see that it actually looks quite a bit different. And so on the top right, you see the status and trends map from eBird, which looks kind of a lot more like the one on the left. So this is just data that is exceptionally valuable and currently doesn't exist for a big part of the state. Obviously, in the counties that have done county atlases, you do have this data, but now it's time to do it again, see how things have changed. Also, the last point on this is that, with climate change, this paper was published. The PI is Morgan Tingley, who's the chair of our Science Advisory Committee, a professor at UCLA. He's also president-elect of the American Ornithological Society. In this paper, they show that about 2/3 of the way that birds are responding to climate change is related to the timing of their breeding, as opposed to changing their geographic range or going north or south. We know they're doing that, but their predominant response, most species, is a changing in timing of when they're breeding. An oak titmouse, for example, is breeding, I think, 14 days earlier than it was. So anyway, all of that is just some background on why this is important. To give you some updates on the Atlas status, I just pulled these slides. So before I go to the next slide, I'll say that when we launched, we were really hoping that we would have, by the end of March, 15,000 checklists. So now it's May 20th. So we were probably hoping for, let's double that, 30,000 by the end of May. And it's May 20th. So hoping for 30,000. How many are we at? 108,933 checklists, which is just mind-blowing. Absolutely stunned at how quickly birders across the state have picked this up. And never in our wildest dreams did we think we could cross 100,000 in the first year, let alone early May or mid-May. And that's coming from over 4,000 contributors. These are people who have joined a project on the website, logged in to the project and submitted at least one list. New York State, they just finished their 3rd statewide breeding bird atlas. They also used this eBird portal. It took them over 3 years to cross 4,000 atlasers, and we were able to cross that in less than 3 months. So pretty awesome. And that is coming from about over 6,500 blocks. About almost 40% of the blocks have some data now, and from all 58 counties, which is just awesome. The other really incredible thing, we were curious, are we having an impact on eBirders in terms of how much they use breeding codes? So we looked at the historic use of breeding codes on eBird from 2021 on, and we compared it with all of eBird for 2026, and you can see these just absolutely incredible jumps. Now we're getting close to about a 600% increase across all eBird in terms of people using breeding codes. And so being able to have that impact that quickly is one of the reasons why the project has had so much early enthusiasm, both from birdwatchers and also from the state of California and federal agencies as well. Some tools I want to quickly say, I mentioned it before, but Birdathon is an app for iPhone developed by Barry Langdon-Lazane, who I'm sure some of you know. He's a regional coordinator in San Luis Obispo County now for the Atlas, and he reworked some of the Birdathon app so that it is incorporating California Bird Atlas blocks, and there's some really cool ways to view the breeding codes on there as well. And then I wanted to also share, I'm going to share something else now. We just launched this new thing that we're really excited about called Blockboard. And I can share the address for this after. But our science director developed this tool. And with this, you can click on your home block, or you can zoom out. Let's get up to Santa Clara County here. let's see here. So in this block, for example, this block, you hover over it, it's the name, San Jose West Northwest. And on the right, we use eBird status and trends to rank the species that are expected to be appearing in the breeding cycle in this block. And then as you go down, the Atlas status column shows whether or not they have been confirmed yet. Pretty impressive. Whoever's living in this block is doing a very good job, because like the first 15 are already confirmed. And then you'd see like the quote unquote lowest hanging fruit would be white-breasted nuthatch, which has been confirmed as a probable code. And then under that, brown-headed cowbird, but then, yep, mallard confirmed. And a lot of the stuff in Blockboard is clickable. So, if you were curious, like, oh, this house finch, first confirmed April 19th, you can click that, and it'll take it to the eBird list. And then also what's interesting is over here under the map, you can sort these by the most number of species that the model predicts to be in that block. I thought if you'd asked me what block I think would have the most breeding bird species, I would have said, a coastal block and maybe in San Diego County or something like that. No, it is all about Modoc County. They have about 15 of the top 20 blocks. Lassen, there are a few coastal ones on there. Marin gets on there early. Ventura gets on there early. But so much of it is Modoc County, Lassen, some of these counties where there's just not a lot of birders, but they happen to be in these really incredible areas. And so, when we zoom out on this map, and this is updated daily as new effort comes in, this is Modoc County here. You can see there has not been a lot of effort, right? You look in the Bay Area, it's already dark blue. This is shaded by the number of effort hours for the Atlas so far. And so, that's one of the reasons why we're continuing to fundraise, and, with the goal of eventually being able to hire field technicians to go to some of these areas, because we can do our best to get volunteers to expand and go to new areas, but there's only so much we can do. And every successful state atlas has used a combination of volunteers and paid field technicians. So we're continuing to raise funds to support that. And that'll mainly go in regions like that. Also in the, Shasta Cascade and Klamath Mountains, some parts of the San Joaquin Valley, on the east side of the Sierra, and the Mojave Desert, which is just huge. And there's not a lot of access in a lot of areas. Some of the land is, military owned. A lot of it is BLM, but you need like a four-wheeler, and maybe there's not a lot out there getting, encouraging you to get out there. And so this is an incredible resource that we just launched today. Actually, sent an email about it today to Cowbirds, and so I just wanted to preview this a little bit. The eBird website itself is here, and you log in to join the project. I've already joined, so it'll just say, do I want to leave, which I don't. And then up here, once you're in here, you can look at all these different things. You can go to explore, you can go to the effort map. This shows a map that's somewhat similar to Blockboard. I think ours is kind of better though, But you can also look up, Santa Clara County. Let's check out Santa Clara County here. And you can see that already 3,464 checklists for Santa Clara County from 357 atlasers, which is awesome. Then you scroll down here and look by the top atlasers by confirmed species, and then lists all the species and whether or not they've been possible, probable, or confirmed. And this is just for Santa Clara County. So, this Atlas through eBird costs a large amount of money to set up, but it is cool because it's basically like 58 county atlases for the price of one. If you go to the California numbers and then you toggle by counties, you can see by effort hours on the right here, Alameda's a lot, Los Angeles a lot, and Santa Clara over 2,500 hours. I mean, in terms of how many people are there and the size of the county, that's really strong. Whereas some of the more remote counties, it's gonna take some work. Sutter County, only 58 hours. So that's a snapshot into how we're starting to think about getting coverage expanded to some of those areas. I just wanted to give you a quick update on some of those tools, and then back to my other deck, and then I'm almost done and happy to answer any questions. This is the website if you wanted to screenshot it or whatever, if you haven't joined yet. This is the URL for you to join the project. The most impactful way to support the Atlas at this point is to get someone else to join, because that could lead to hundreds of checklists. And so if you know someone, if you're already atlasing, great. If you haven't yet, please join us. It's fun. It's not scary, we promise. And if you are already atlasing, and if you know some people that are on the fence, we encourage you to, maybe talk it up about how fun it is and how it's, not as hard as it seems, and it's really not that hard. So also we have our own website, californiabirdatlas.org, where we accept donations to our nonprofit, as well as, showing the sponsored species, which Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance has for American avocet and others. And with any questions, if you have some questions but you don't feel like asking them now, or if you're watching the recording of this, please reach out. This email address, Sam Saffron, science director, and I check it all the time. So any question, there are no stupid questions. Any question at all, reach out, and we'll provide an answer to the best we can. And thank you so much for showing up and being here. I wish I was there in person. Hope to be next time. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great, Van. That was fantastic. Yeah, there are some questions coming in. I'm going to give people another minute or two to pose their questions, but I've got a couple just to start things off. One is, first of all, is Kimball Garrett still going to get his LA Atlas, or is it going to be pulled into the California Atlas?
He has been pulled into the California Atlas.
So is he happy with that? Is he?
Yeah, he's atlasing.
He likes what's happening so far.
He's on board. Yeah, he's been atlasing a lot out in the Antelope Valley, and it's been great. I think it really truly will result in 58 county atlases as well as a state atlas. So the data will be free and available for everyone in perpetuity. And so whoever would want to put together a county specific book could do so.
That's
so
great.
Kimball's
he's not easy to please, I'm sure. So.
he's great.
So I have to say that the breeding codes they are so fun to use. I feel like my checklists are now important. I feel like it validates me as a birder. They're exciting to document that and know that it's going to really good use. It was a awesome choice to add so many breeding codes and clarify them so they're easy to understand, color code them so we know that as they get darker, they're more profound confirmation of breeding. So that was a stroke of genius, I think, on your part and the other people in your team. Is Blockboard available for us to look at right now, or
it is?
Okay,
it is. Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat. It's californiabirdatlas.org/Blockboard.
And you already asked my question about how people who are not creating checklists, how they can contribute. You've already answered that. But I have a question about atlases in general. Is the atlas observation period always 5 years? I think that's what our atlas was. Is that traditional?
It is most of the time, yeah. I think there are some examples of states or countries. In Europe they do these usually at the country level or sometimes at the continent level. Sometimes 6 years, sometimes 4 years. But the idea and why 5 years has seemed to stick
Hmm.
is that it's long enough, 5 years, that it smooths out some variability. Like, if it was only 1 year, you might have a weird year of robins everywhere. You're running into
Yep.
robins as you're walking down the street. And the next year there's no robins, and some weather patterns, obviously, that we're dealing with whiplash in that way. And so it's long enough to smooth some of that out, but it's still short enough. It's not 20 years, it's 5 years. So it's still short enough that it is a snapshot in time. And so, 20 years from now, and also looking backwards, you can really see these patterns. And so, yeah, 5 years is it oddly has stood the test of time. And I think yours is 5 years, if I'm not
Which is
mistaken.
two. I'm sure Pete.
And most of there's a couple of counties that are six, but yeah, most are five.
Yeah, and so after the 5 years end, you're going to start 4 years of data processing, and the final year or 2 years will be producing the final printed piece. What happens after that? Will people still be entering data into the California Bird Atlas on eBird?
So they'll still be entering data into eBird, and I think hopefully our one of our hopes of this is that people will just kind of get addicted to putting breeding codes on and continue using those codes. But the Atlas period will be over, and so it's going to be sad. I've heard from people in other states where the atlases have come to an end, and they talk about their experiences and their memories, and they wish it was still the atlas time, and they're bummed that it's over. And so, yeah, the atlas itself will come to an end, the fieldwork phase at the end of 2030. And the idea would be that we would do it again 20 years later.
Oh, great. All right. So Pete Dunton left a cryptic message here. He just says Black Rail. I assume that's a new breeding record. Is that correct, Pete?
I think he put it in there when you were
Yeah.
talking about the
Yeah.
new ones.
So
Yeah.
that's been added. So that puts us up to at least 180 as far as breeding currently known breeding birds in the county. I think there are some more. Like I'm not sure Black Skimmer made it into the first atlas as a breeding bird, and maybe not even bald eagle.
I've got a prediction, one that you might not like, but I bet a new one soon is going to be Swinhoe's White Eye.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah.
They just had their first. It was just recorded in San Francisco.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago.
Well, we got grackles all over the place now, so
Yeah.
it'll
But
happen.
Pete mentioned also to me offline earlier today, wanted me to mention, will quickly, that just so everybody knows, the typical eBird review process, if like all of us, everybody, I've received emails from eBird in the past about observations. And now as an eBird reviewer, I kind of see how that works. The codes, and when people enter codes, that's kind of like a different review process. And so the eBird reviewers aren't the ones that are reviewing any data, any codes. So that's all our review team.
Right,
So
right.
yeah,
That's another thing we have in common, actually. I always wanted to be a reviewer. So, so Anna's got a great question. She says, "We're new birders, so we're wondering, why do we need these maps at all, besides just the research? What are the purposes?"
yeah. So welcome to the birding world. First of all,
Yes.
always
Yeah.
happy to hear when people are birding. And I'd say to boil it down, um, you know, birding has exploded, right? But birding effort has tended to consolidate itself into relatively dense pockets and isn't really geospatially spread out. And so we have a lot of data for smaller areas, and there's a lot of areas that we don't have any data for. Why do we need data? Well, in a world that as we know, our landscapes, our environments are changing at unprecedented rates, right? And so because of that, land management organizations and agencies have to make assumptions about how they will continue to change in the future. and make decisions about, okay, what land is important to protect. When there's billions of dollars being spent on land acquisition, how do we make sure that that is being spent in the most strategic ways possible, to get the most bang for your buck? And one of the best ways to do that is to find where birds are breeding, and to understand how that's changing over time. And also just to look at the areas where there's high densities, given that breeding birds are such good indicators of how the overall ecosystem is doing. And so in 44 states, these breeding bird atlases they're part of their core conservation infrastructure at their state wildlife agencies.
Mhm.
And in the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they do not have one. And so it's about time that that changes, to equip them and everyone with a just better framework for making these conservation decisions.
Yeah, yeah, and I hear iNaturalist and eBird being cited more and more often in policy decisions as evidence of species that are present, species that need to be protected, species that may not be obvious to the first wave of examiners. So it's very important. Carol Ann asks a good question. When non-Atlas eBirders use breeding codes, can those data be used by the Atlas at all?
Great question. Love that. So a little nuanced answer, but at the highest level, yes. At the end of the Atlas period, we will be pulling in data from eBird that is not submitted through the Atlas. Um, However, those non-Atlas checklists won't populate some of our, they won't go on Blockboard, they won't go on the eBird maps. That doesn't mean they're not used, but when something is submitted through the Atlas project, we paid more to add one question. And it might seem like a silly, small thing, but this new question asks if that is a complete list of all the breeding observations you observed above H and S. And the fact that we have a yes or no answer to that allows us to know not only what birds you observed breeding or not, but also which ones you did not observe breeding.
Mhm.
Whereas if we didn't ask that question, we wouldn't know that you didn't observe those other species breeding. And so it makes our end product exponentially more powerful. And so you get more bang for your buck if you submit it through the Atlas project, but we will still be using non-Atlas data to inform our final outputs, as well as data from other sources like iNaturalist and agency data sets and, you know, sensitive species data sets from certain organizations that where the data is not public, but we're working on agreements to get that data for the Atlas.
Great. Marianne asks, she has two species raising families in her Los Altos yard, but she's not sure what codes to use. She has seen the birds collecting grubs and flying into a bush, but she hasn't seen a nest. So what code would you recommend for Marianne?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will put in the chat, I will put a link to our guidance for breeding codes. Um, it sounds to me, so basically you would put the highest one that you observe for that given checklist or that given day. If you saw an adult with food, it was carrying that food to a location that you were pretty sure was the nest or young birds, then that sounds like it would be the CF code or carrying food. You don't need to see the nest uh, to have it count. So that would be the carrying food code, it sounds like most likely, CF. If you then saw the bird get to the nest and you saw little babies on the nest, then you wouldn't use CF anymore. You would upgrade it to NY, nest with young. So you're always trying to, get your codes higher for each species, for each list, because it's just a better probability that you know, it's real. But
Yeah,
carrying food is CF is a great code as well.
and you're likely you're implying all the lower down codes by hitting the higher one. I mean, I've
Exactly.
run into that before. I've seen a nest being built, and I've seen a nest occupied on the same
Mhm.
trip by the same species,
Yeah.
different individuals. So I was like, well, I can't pick more than one, so I just picked the higher one, and I think that's
Yep.
the point, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Right. So here's a question I'm not sure I understand. It says, this is Maureen. Will you work out the atlas blocks that correspond to our checklists? So I think,
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is so that is, it's important that when you start a new checklist, um, and this is one thing that Birdathon, the app, is so great at, is that before you start the checklist, if you check in Birdathon where you are in relation to the block boundaries, like if you're in the middle of the block, you can start a checklist and walk around and not really think of it, and you'll be in the same block the whole time. But if you start a list and you're on the edge, you're close to another block, you want to make sure for that list you stay in the same block for that list. And if you want to go to the other block, you can and should just start a new list
hmm,
for that new block. And so I hope that answers the question. But it's important.
you get a reminder at the border.
Yeah, they turn it red if you cross. That
Yeah.
happened to me a couple of times.
So this is part of Maureen's question also. This might help. She says, also, I heard from others that when you reported singing birds in February and March, that they were pretty sure that the birds were leaving to breed elsewhere. You're going to sort that out, I so she assumed.
Yeah, that's one of the major differences between sort of modern bird atlases and historic, older bird atlases. When breeding bird atlases were starting out, a lot of them used this idea called safe dates, and that meant that the volunteers would, need to remember date ranges of when the birds were breeding and know which birds were breeding where, and we're only supposed to put a singing code if that were to be within those dates in that place. And so while that makes sense, it also, especially when you're doing a statewide atlas, it does create some issues. One of which is we don't want to make any assumptions, or we want to make as few as possible. And if we're telling people like what dates are safe, then what if those are wrong? What if there's birds breeding before that? We don't want to lose that data. And so what our atlas is doing, our atlas project, and what most modern atlases do is simply to ask, report what you observe. If you observe a bird singing, it doesn't matter if you know it doesn't breed there, still put S on that species. And on the back end, we and our science advisory committee, we know, what species breed in those areas. If, in my backyard in LA, white-crowned sparrows, they do not breed here. They sing here. And so when I have one singing, I mark S. And on the eBird portal, eventually what we're going to be able to do, what we can do now, we just are going to do it after the mad rush of spring, is for the white-crowned sparrows in LA, we can change the codes from a breeding code, that will be crossed out on your list, and it'll say behavioral code, singing. And so it retains the data, the observational data. It retains that the bird was singing, but it changes it from a breeding observation just to a behavioral data. So that will also allow us to answer some interesting questions like, do certain species start singing more often, like right before they leave? And it makes it easier for the atlasers and the volunteers because you don't have to memorize a million different dates and ranges. If the bird's singing, put S. There was an amazing observation on New Year's Day, actually, in San Francisco, of cedar waxwings that were doing this courtship ritual of passing these berries to each other. And the user correctly, even though they don't breed in San Francisco, they marked C because that's a courtship thing. And that will be changed from a breeding code to a behavioral code. But that's really interesting that they do that in the non-breeding ground. So we want that data. but it won't mess anything up at the same time.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned white-crowned sparrows. I think they and other zonotrichias pretty much sing year round, do they not?
Yeah, I think they do.
We get
Yeah,
them singing in midwinter here, and they're
yeah,
clearly not breeding, except for
yeah,
the Natali's on the coast. But
yeah.
Helen's asking a good question. She says, when we report an active nest on eBird or the Atlas, do other birders have access to that information, such as where the nest is located or not? For example, the owl nest at Vasona was attracting lots of birders, photographers daily to see the owlets. A high school kid was posting on Nextdoor, inviting people to meet him at the footbridge at 7 p.m. to go see the owls. Someone told me they saw about 90 people one day watching this pair of owlets. I saw approximately 30 people one time observing the birds. So my understanding is, you correct me if I'm wrong, that unless they input specific locations for the bird, it's just going to be tagged to the hotspot or within that 3 mile block.
Yeah, it's a good question. It basically the answer is it the functions the same way that eBird does this way. So there are certain species that are sensitive, and for those sensitive species, they do not display the locations. eBird obscures those locations, as does iNaturalist. That's not going to stop anyone on Nextdoor, but it'll stop
Yeah.
uh, some of that. But yeah, I mean, just like with eBird, that or if they're not finding out on eBird, they'll find out some other way. I also think, like, when I read that quote, I'm like, I can understand why there's a concern, and it's a very valid concern about bird safety, and it's important that we don't get too close to birds, especially when they're on the nest. It's one of the most vulnerable periods of time. But also the idea of 90 people seeing baby owls, that's pretty cool too, in terms of turning people onto birds. And maybe 10 of those people will change their life and forget what they're doing and become birders and contribute for a long time. But it is bird safety, and we have a whole code of ethics on our website, that's been developed by atlases across the country, and it is very important, especially when birds are building their nests, when they're incubating, and when the birds are small nestlings. Those are the most sensitive periods of time. So it's really important to not get in their way. And if you notice that any of their behavior has changed, get out of there.
So this project is different from traditional atlases in that this is crowdsourced, and like our atlas and many others were rather not, I wouldn't say secretive, but it was closed. It was a closed group of people who were submitting their documented sightings to a central office of sorts. So this is much more public, and people do have to be more careful about the information
Yeah.
they put in. But doing the banding code and attaching it to a hotspot or an atlas block is not going to give the kind of information that Helen is worried about. People have to make that extra effort to put in the GPS and describe the tree that it's in,
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah, definitely. And people's tracks on their list are not made public. So
Right, exactly. Yeah,
yeah, so
and
it's generally obscured.
there are other good reasons for that, just safety
Yeah.
for humans. Bev is asking, I use Merlin for sound ID, but only report birds I see. How do I know if it is singing versus other vocalization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what we learned from other states who have done atlases recently is that the Merlin app is actually a really good tool for this. If you go in, the part of the Merlin app, the sound ID is awesome. But then if you go to the Explore tab and you are like looking at the bird description, and it down below it has some examples of the sounds of those birds. And often they'll have 8 or 10 different recordings. In parentheses, or in the below that, it'll say the title of the recording will either be call or something like flock call or song.
Mhm.
And so you can listen to those different examples in the Merlin app And we haven't been shown an example of that that's wrong yet. So it's a really good resource. And so, for something like house finch, you can go in and, okay, that's what a call is. That's what a call is. And then you listen to the song and you can learn it that way. So that's a pretty good resource.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question too.
Yeah, great question.
So here's one last question. Maureen says she doesn't use eBird in the field. She's has too much to keep track of when she's leading a field trip. So even if it's the same hotspot, but I guess it travels across two atlas blocks, she's asking if she needs to submit more than one checklist.
Yeah, if it crosses Atlas blocks, you would. But yeah, so if there's other, if you're not doing eBird, maybe someone is in the group and they're atlasing. Yeah, people are starting to get keen on this, so they would start a checklist and then start a new one for the new block. And from a science perspective, shorter checklists are always better.
Mhm.
It allows the scientists to understand, what was observed in this 15-minute period is a lot more valuable than what was observed over this, let's say, 10-hour period,
Oh yeah.
to use an extreme example, or a 3-hour period even. So the shorter, the better. It's kind of annoying to do another checklist and you have to start the list, but it's not too bad. And so, yeah, the guidance would be to start a new list for each block you're in.
I
And some
think
hotspots are all in the same block, so it wouldn't be an issue.
I think actually sometimes it gets a little bit easier once you have to do it a couple of times in a row.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
I think if I'm not wrong, Maureen is one of the educators from Golden Gate Bird Alliance.
Oh, awesome.
So
Another partner.
yeah. What's their bird? What is Golden Gate sponsoring? Do you know?
They, oh man, you're putting me on the,
It's okay
is
if you
it,
don't remember.
no, I know this, now I have to look it up. It's bugging me because it's on
Oh,
the tip of my tongue.
no worries, no
It's
worries.
funny. There were a few chapters that a few groups who, everyone at first wanted snowy plover, and not Golden Gate, I don't think, but Sea and Sage Audubon down in Orange County. They were the first one to come on board, so they got it. Golden Gate Bird Alliance. They have the. Where is it?
Man, don't worry about it. We're gonna have our own Megan Jankowski talk to us about the app.
Oh,
Okay,
okay, great. Well, it's
we'll get it squared away.
nice to hear your voice, Maureen. I've got one more question, and then maybe we should wrap up. So I'm concerned that, with all those white blocks in the east and the north, and in the deserts, how are you going to incentivize people, not paid field observers, but everyday people? How are you going to incentivize them to go out there and give it a try? For me, it would be a real draw to go to those places and try to darken those blocks. Do you have any sort of campaign to get people to do something like that, to take that on as a challenge?
Yeah, it's a really good question. For this, the nice thing about having 5 years is that we're not looking at year one versus year two versus year three we're looking holistically at the 5 years. So we have 5 years. The first year, this year, we made the decision to see what happens. California's never done this before. Let's see how much we can get. Let's start trying to incentivize people to spread out a little more, but people are going to be learning the apps and learning all the codes and getting their bearings. And then, as we're already starting to see, and as Matthew alluded to, there's a certain draw of coloring in a block that has 0 hours. And so starting next year, and it would be awesome to partner with your org and others on this. And other states have done what they call block busting, and counties have done this as well, where they organize, big groups of people to go out to some of these areas and have like a weekend in Alturas in Modoc County. There's a couple hotels there, and get to see some birds maybe that you need for the state. Northern shrike is there sometime. Seeing like breeding long-billed curlews and American white pelicans and green winged teal and canvasback. Like, sign me up. Like, I mean, I can't wait to get up there. And so, yeah, it'll be a combination, but obviously, the paid field techs will be a big part of it, but also getting volunteers. And then, yeah, Maureen, thank you for you're saving me here for mentioning in the chat that June 4th to June 7th, we're doing our first annual big weekend. We're going to do a big weekend every year, and this is just the first one. And so there's a lot of field trips planned, but also we're just encouraging everyone to get out there and atlas as much as possible. And we're going to have a lot of fun stats after about how many things were.
Like global big day almost.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that iNaturalist does a good job with the bio blitzes, and this to be like an Ava blitz, so a bird blitz.
Exactly, and that's within a peak of this the highest number of confirmed codes, like in a calendar year.
Right.
That weekend is within a week of the peak of that. So it's when there's the most breeding birds across the state within a week. So it's timed. So there's a lot of baby birds around. It's going to be fun.
Well, Van, this is fantastic. I've been wanting to come and talk to us for so long, and it's great to see you again. I found this really informative. I hope people enjoyed it. I hope that you're all participating. And if you aren't doing that yet, that you take a look at the website and consider joining. And every checklist is going to contribute to the completed atlas, and it's all going to help, especially if you go to one of these blank atlas blocks. Give it a try. I got a long weekend coming up. Go to a block that's not occupied, that hasn't been done yet. We have all these hearts and claps.
I love it. It's making me feel so good.
Yeah, you should feel good. This is marvelous. So thank you so much, Van. I look forward to talking to you again and getting updates when you have them. Best of luck with this project. You deserve a huge round of applause.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Fantastic.
Love all the emojis. Oh, made my week. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you all in the field soon.
Goodbye, Van. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. See you next time.
Thanks all.